probably all know this, but when we're doing these workshops on Zoom, it's best to keep yourselves on mute until talking, and that way there's not background noise that's distracting. And we are going to be recording this today so that we can send it to people who weren't able to make the workshop at this time. So I hope that's all okay with you. Great.
Awesome. Shall we get started? Okay. Hi everyone. It's really nice to meet you all. I'm Charlotte from Oxford Hub, she, her, and thank you so much for joining us today. Lizzie and I from Oxford Hub will be leading the workshop alongside Christabel from CAG, and yeah, should we start by doing a little intro? Maybe say who you are, your name, pronouns, and your organisation. I guess we'll start with, I'll just pick someone. Start with Kathleen. Do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Kathleen O'Donnell, and I'm unaffiliated with an organization right now.
Do you want to pass it? Should we just pass it around, I guess?
Sorry, is it me next? No.
Yeah, you go next.
Sorry, I'm not Sonny Boy, that's my husband. I'm Kate from Sustainable Shrivenham. Hi.
I can go next. I'm Lizzie, as Charlotte said, from Oxford Hub, and I'll be helping facilitate the session today as well. And I use she, her pronouns. I will pass on to Liz Hodgson, another Liz in the group.
Hi, I'm Liz Hodgson, she, her, and I'm here because of Low Carbon East Oxford. And I'll pass on to Catherine Ryan.
Hello, I'm Kathy Ryan, and I'm part of two groups, Hook Norton Community Land Trust and Hook Norton Low Carbon. Thanks. Oh, and I'll pass on to Julia Patrick.
Hi, I'm Julia, and I'm part of Low Carbon Oxford North. I'll pass on to Esther.
Hi there, I'm doing Sustainable Architecture, a master's course up at the Centre for Alternative Technology, and I am interested in everything CAG and participatory design. I'll pass on to Anais, is that okay?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Anais. I also work at CAG. You might notice that Christabel and I are in the same room. So I am a network support coordinator at CAG, and I used to help volunteer at Oxgrove Community Garden as well. So that was my entrance into the CAG world. And I use she, her pronouns. And I'll pass on to Ian.
Hello. Oh, sorry, croaky throat. I'm Ian Nutt. I work at the Earth Trust down at the Whitnam Clumps in the south of the county, and I lead on our partnerships and programmes. So yeah, really excited to hear what everyone's got to say.
Trying to think who hasn't.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Daria.
I haven't gone. Yeah, I'm Daria. I actually go by Dasha. She, her pronouns, and I just I'm not affiliated with anything right now, but I've just finished history masters at Oxford, and I wrote about the history of allotment gardens. So interested in getting involved in urban gardening here.
Great, so I think that just leaves me. So I'm Christabel. I'm along with Anais, I work at CAG Oxfordshire, and I'm excited to be part of facilitating this in the later part of the session.
Great, it's so nice to meet you all, and I'm sure we'll get to know each other a little bit better throughout the workshop and throughout our discussions. So if I just share our presentation with you, and then we can get going. Cool, can everybody see that? Okay, fantastic. So as I said, really nice to meet you all. And I'll just give you a little summary of what we're going to go through today in this engagement and participation in community programs workshop. So here is the session outline. So I'll give you a little introduction to Oxford Hub and what we do as an organisation. Our programme design, so he'll be suggesting ways to adjust what you're doing to make it easier for people to engage in long-term volunteering and making and using inclusive delivery models. Recruitment and publicity, so how to get the word out in a clear and engaging way. Onboarding and inducting, how to get people started basically. Supporting and maintaining, which is super important, how to keep people involved and support them on their activist journey. And then I'm going to pass over to Christabel from CAG, who's going to talk about power and privilege. So just like a few important bits and bobs. So each of these sections, we're going to include a series of reflection questions at the end of my little talk. And then we'll put you into breakout rooms for 15 minutes. So we'll do 10 minutes of discussion in the breakout rooms and then 5 minutes of discussion altogether. And then we'll move on to the next section. So I hope that makes sense. So also some other things to note is that we will send out the slides afterwards, so you don't need to worry about writing everything down. It's all on there, it will be sent to you. And there's loads of space for reflection and discussion. So we'll be, as I said, putting you into breakout rooms. It'd be great if we could try and get everyone with an equal amount speaking. I know some people might not have as much experience with each section, but it'd be great if we could hear points from everybody. And the list of questions you get at the end of each section will be a good point for discussion. It'd be good to get perspectives from everyone, as I say, make notes and come back together and then talk about them all. And so yeah, we're trying to pack quite a lot into quite a short space of time. So if anything doesn't make sense, please ask. We're all here to learn, and yeah, should be really good. So I'll kick things off with a little intro into Oxford Hub. So a little background, we are a local charity bringing people and organisations together to create meaningful relationships through a range of community programmes. So we try and design and deliver programmes focused on building relationships between people and organisations in the community. So last year we ran 20 programmes and had over 1,200 active volunteers on these programmes, including like residents, students, community partners. Everybody got involved. So in this workshop, we're going to be discussing 4 of our key programmes. These are our practical support scheme, which is where we match residents that need support. So for example, needing their prescriptions dropped to them, shopping done, we match them with volunteers in the city. Schools Plus, which is our free one-to-one tutoring programme for state school pupils in Oxford. We match them with volunteer tutors. And Phone Links is our programme matching volunteers that might be socially isolated or benefit from a call with people that are willing to call them every week or every day, depending on their needs. And finally, OxUnboxed, which is our refill shop, which you may or may not have been to in our office on Little Clarendon Street. So all of these programmes have 1 staff member assigned, and every programme has over 100 volunteers. And so we're going to take you through these case studies to illustrate the key points of these programmes. So I'm going to pass over to Lizzie, who's going to talk about our programme design.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, so program design. As with our other sections, I'm going to chat you through our top tips, talk you through a little case study based on one of our programs, and then you're going to have the reflection sessions and the reflection questions and be able to go away and discuss. So when we think about the way we design our programs, it can be a bit of a tricky one for community groups. Like I know a lot of you are from low carbon groups and things like that, which are awesome. And they tend to be a bit, in my experience anyway, this might be different, but they tend to be a bit like grassroots movements where you might not necessarily think about, do I need to design this as a program sort of thing? And there is definitely a balance between designing it yourself and taking over and being a creative genius or evil genius maybe when you're creating that program versus making sure you are working on something that's really easy for people to engage with. So program design is all about making sure you are creating those opportunities for people to engage and enabling you to share responsibility with other people. So lots of smaller community programs are driven by one or two really passionate people, which is awesome and quite often can't be avoided. Those people are amazing. We all know so many of those awesome people in the community and have so much respect for them. But unless we can share that enthusiasm and that responsibility, then it's very hard to create sustainable movements or reach those wider audiences. Okay, so if you're one person representing the local low carbon group in your community, you working on your own to try and spread the word is never going to reach as many people as if that responsibility was shared between, say, 5 people, and you would then potentially reach 5 times as many people as if it was just one person working on it. So we need to create a range of ways that people can engage with your program and approach it with the mindset that people want to get involved with your program. Everyone who's here who has said the program that they're working on or your dissertation that you worked on or anything like that, they all sound fantastic. People are so excited about these issues. People want to engage and do something meaningful. Your task is making that as fun and as easy as possible. Okay, so people are out there, they want to get involved. It's just making it as easy as possible for them to do that. So if you hop onto the next slide, Charlotte. Thank you. Okay, so to give you a bit of an idea of what I mean in a more concrete way, we're going to chat about OxUnboxed, which is our refill shop run by the community for the community. So at the top, well, the top, I guess that's not, it's not a hierarchical structure, but we have the Oxford Hub staff member who is sort of trying to coordinate the project and bring everybody together. We then have the committee, so that's a group of about 10 people who are involved with OxUnboxed. They are sort of a democratic steering committee who each have their own very clear role. So we have someone who does the food orders, someone who is the contact for the wider pool of volunteers, someone who responds to the emails, that kind of thing. So very clear roles on the committee. And then we have our volunteer pool and all the customers who engage with OxUnboxed by either taking shifts or coming and shopping. So it's not just the one Oxford Hub staff member trying to coordinate over 100 volunteers to come and do things and run the shop and that sort of thing. The responsibility for running the shop is very much devolved between people who have the time and the energy to commit to it. So if you hop to the next slide again, Charlotte. So the way this might work, for example, is that the volunteer thinks they'd like to get involved, they find our website, they sign up, they then get the information that they need, and then they are very clearly helped to arrange their first shift. So it's very clear what they've signed up for. It's very clear what their next steps are as soon as they've signed up. And there is a range of commitment levels for them as well. So if they wanted to come just for 2 hours, that's fine, they can do that. If they want to come for every single Saturday, all day, they can do that as well. So that kind of commitment level needs to be really, really clear. You need to be super, super clear about what you want from people. What do you want them to do? And how can they get involved in doing that? Okay, so if you want to hop to the next slide, Charlotte. So here are your reflection questions that hopefully you guys are going to go away and chat about. Yeah, feel free to pop any questions in the chat, or just you can hang off going to your breakout rooms and ask any questions before you do that if you have any. But the prompts that we'd like you to discuss in your groups, which you can use in relation to your organisations that you come from, or just you can chat about them generally if you like. So first of all, with regards to programme design, what is it that we're asking people to do? So this needs to be as concise and clear as possible. So not we want them to become a part of a group, or they can come and they can do kind of whatever they want to do in the group. Because that's very confusing for people and actually can seem a bit exclusive, because it kind of depends on you having confidence and relationships with people and being able to carve out your own space. So exactly what are we asking people to do? How specific can we be about that? Then what's the journey for someone who wants to get involved? How do they find out? Who do they get in touch with? And how can we make that journey as easy as possible? Finally, how can we make this program sustainable in the long term by sharing responsibility? Okay, so could I pass on responsibility for the email inbox to someone else, and that way get them more involved in making the magic happen? Does that make sense for everybody? Hopefully those questions are pretty self-explanatory. Yep, not hearing any complaints. Oh yeah, you got your hand up, Julia.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question. At this stage, just looking at this, I'm actually most interested in how you get your committee of 10, which as far as I'm concerned is more volunteers than we ever have. Are we going to come on to that? Is there going to be a chance to look into that as well?
Yes, we are going to talk about recruitment, but for a very, very short answer, by having those volunteers, we then scale up those volunteers to take on that additional level of responsibility. So they're people who've kind of already been involved.
Yeah.
Pop up to the committee, but we are going to talk about recruitment. I think that might be next.
Thank you.
But yeah, cool. Any other questions before we go into breakout groups? Nope. Okay then. Christabel, are you the person who's in charge of the breakout rooms?
Anais is doing it just now. About 3 to 4 people. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works. So if we have 10 minutes to chat, and then we'll come into this group and we can discuss what we talked about, if that sounds good for everybody.
Oh, and just to let you know that we're not recording the breakout rooms. So you're free to say what you want. All right, see you all in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Hiya.
Hiya.
I might join one of the rooms.
Yeah,
good,
Could you put me in?
Do you want to join?
So maybe you could kick
Oh, you should have been invited to 4. Have you seen that?
Oh, maybe I need to stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. All right. I'll join the other one.
or in central Oxford.
No one else is coming back.
Okay, is everybody back? I think we might be waiting for a couple.
Almost, not everyone.
We've got a question from Julia. I'll just give everyone else a couple more. Oh, yeah, I think we might have all the groups back now. Looks like we've got everyone, which is great. Okay, so let's, how are we doing for time, guys? I think we're a bit behind. I'm just thinking in terms of feedback. Cool.
Probably got a couple of minutes for feedback, yeah.
Yeah. So keep popping questions in the chat, and let's do feedback from our groups really quickly. So if we could have one person from each group try and summarize really quickly what you chatted about and any obstacles that you came across, and hopefully we'll come up with some common obstacles that we're all facing at the moment with regards to program design, and how you facilitate those different roles within the team. So let's start off with, I don't know if I can pick on people because I'm not sure what room you're all in. I will nominate Hester from our team to try and give us a bit of a summary of what we chatted about.
The main takeaway was getting people to step up to take on a role in your program, and sort of facilitating that fear that comes with volunteering or taking on a responsibility. Liz, did you have anything to add?
I think that's good. That's enough of it. Thanks.
Great. Can we get some volunteers from the other breakout rooms, please?
Is there anyone from our room who wants to feedback? Otherwise I can try, but Julia, yeah, go.
Yeah, I'll try. I think so there were two of us talking on behalf of their respective low carbon community groups, and I think for Shrivenham, you were talking about recruiting specific roles to the organising committee, I think, and the fact that you've defined those specific roles and you're looking to recruit people who will take the lead on particular topics. So, for example, vegan food choices or something like that, or reducing waste. So so that seemed to me to be a pretty clear idea, but what struck me there was that was at the committee level rather than lots of volunteers for very specific little tasks underneath that, which is and it sort of reflects a bit our experience where I think being very specific about what we're asking people to do is hard, because actually what we want is also more people at the organising committee level who can come with some energy and some thinking and some ideas to drive things forward, and then I feel like out of that can then come the specific tasks. I heard somewhere in the background someone else was on a different breakout room talking about tree planting, and that for me is a good example of where we've managed to recruit a lot of people to come on one day to help with tree planting, and that's not been hard. But we've not managed to get anyone who to provide any sort of commitment to help us on an ongoing basis try and progress the whole program of tree planting of the year, be a bit more strategic about it, think about what the sites are going, build relationships and all of that. So, sorry, that was more than a summary.
No, that's great. That's very similar to what we were saying in our group as well. It's interesting. 2 more volunteers, I think.
I'm happy to go for our group, unless Ian or Kathy, you want to chip in. So like the main sticking point we sort of had was having volunteers and choosing the right tasks for them, so they might not necessarily want to do the tasks that we need doing, and it's all about choosing the right pathway to put them on, because you're coming to the same goal at the end, even though that might mean slightly negotiating or compromising the roles that people are taking. And if Ian or Kathy, if you have anything to add.
Well, only that Ian and I were at very different ends of the spectrum, because Ian works for the Earth Trust and they have a huge group of volunteers, but already doing lots of things. But as Charlotte said, Ian was thinking of how to change that path a bit and how to direct volunteers towards doing the most useful things for the actual trust. And in my case, we've got a board of 10 and we've got planning permission to build some sustainable, affordable homes with a communal building. And we're going to need to galvanise volunteers quite seriously, really, to run the community cafe, for example, and to grow food that can be used in the cafe and things like that, you know. So we've got quite a big, and that will be in about a year's time. So I think we need to start fairly soon in getting people interested. And so it's very interesting to hear about being clear. So that's probably my next task, is to be clear about what we want. That's going to take quite a bit of working out, I think. So
it definitely does. Sounds like a really exciting project, though.
Yes, you know, as long as we get the volunteers, yes.
Yeah. You will. We need someone from the final group, or have we had everyone?
I can go for our group. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
We were talking about adapting volunteer roles as capacity changes within the projects, and as the projects maybe become bigger or develop, they could either develop up or down, so they could get bigger or smaller, and adapting volunteer roles with that. I think Christabel was talking about creating roles like volunteer coordinators for different areas if a project grows so big that it needs specific people who are managing certain areas. And then we were also talking about managing volunteer energy levels and making sure, and that part of that is communicating with them really well and making sure that they're aware of everything that's going on in every step of their volunteer engagement. So like at the beginning, being really clear with what they're doing, and then also making them feel like they always have a point of contact that they can discuss things with, and sort of monitoring their energy levels and making sure that it's still fun for them, they're still enjoying it, and managing fatigue. So I guess like with the volunteer link that we were doing during the pandemic, people might have thought that they might be helping someone for a month or two, and then it is much longer than that, and just making sure that people are still comfortable with their roles. And yeah, because I think it's important to keep people engaged, because you don't want to sort of like put them off volunteering if they feel like they're doing too much. Yeah, so looking at how we can overcome that.
Yeah, we talked about that a bit in our group as well, in terms of some parts of Oxford having a very high resident turnover. So whether there's a lot of students there, or it's just a lot of maybe families renting short term rather than owning property and living there for 20 plus years, and how that affects these community projects if you're having that quite high turnover. Definitely an interesting and a tricky one. But yeah, okay, cool. Thank you, everyone. A lot of common themes there, and a lot of those issues hopefully we're going to unpick over our coming breakout discussion groups as well, which is good. We've got a question here from Julia, who asked whether it's better to try and recruit people for one-off tasks or for ongoing and regular tasks, and what people respond to more. Really, really good question, Julia. As you said, when you're feeding back from your group, it's very, very easy to get very low levels of engagement. So lots of people on your mailing list, or, 20 people turning up to a one-off tree planting event where they know that they are just turning up for that hour. They know very clearly what they're going to do. They can see in their mind, I'm going to turn up, I'm going to plant a tree, that's going to be fine. So those do tend to be easier to do. It's definitely harder to get that longer term commitment, but it's the longer term commitment which is, in my experience anyway, crucial to a project becoming really, really successful. We talked a little bit in our group about how you can progress people from this big kind of vague pool of well-wishers who are happy and enthusiastic, but they're not taking that next step. And we were saying perhaps it's a bit of a mix of giving people a very clear role and, sending an email to everyone on your mailing list saying, we are looking for someone to do replying to the email inbox and managing the finances. It will take 2 hours per week. You can step down whenever you like. It can be a temporary role, but making sure that you are doing that incredibly clear communication, which happens so easily with one-off events or one-off tasks, but making sure you're applying the same communication rules and the same clarity to a longer term role so that someone knows exactly what they're signing up for. Because we did chat about in our group people's fear of that, oh, do I want to join a committee? Is that going to be, you know, 3 hours of meetings every week or something like that, which can be off-putting if people are a bit worried about doing something like that. But it's also bearing in mind who's engaging with your programs and whether perhaps you are just engaging people who want to come for a one-off event, where you might be able to look, and we're going to talk about recruitment, as I said, but where you could look for people who are actively looking for a weekly volunteering commitment, because there definitely are lots of them out there, whether they're a DofE, Duke of Edinburgh person who's trying to get their volunteering hours sorted, or they're a retired person who's looking to take part in more community work, and how we can access those audiences as well. I don't know if you'd add anything to that answer, Charlotte.
No, I think that covers everything, and I think we're going on to publicity and recruitment next, so that feeds in quite nicely.
Awesome. I'll hand over to you then. Crack on.
Thank you. I will just show you the presentation again. Fantastic. Really great to hear everyone's opinions on that. It is tricky for sure, but we definitely will find ways to make it successful for everyone. Okay, so moving on to recruitment and publicity. So this is a key theme in, I think, all of the discussions, because so important to get volunteers on board, which is often like a big barrier. But once you get them on board, like that's a big step reached. So there are like some super important things to consider when thinking about recruitment and publicity in like a social or environmental action context. So firstly, like the information that the volunteers need needs to be super easy to find, easily accessible, and ideally maybe like all in one place, so volunteers know where to find all this information and then can access it again, and potentially even like spread it between people. And secondly, word of mouth is literally an incredibly powerful tool. I think we all underestimate how important it is, like hearing other people's opinions on things. So sharing the responsibility with more than one person allows the information to reach a much wider audience, as we said before. And I think we definitely underestimate this. And we definitely see this in our programs as well. I know Lizzie's going to touch on Schools Plus later, but our Schools Plus program, like so many of our volunteers are word of mouth. They've applied because one of their friends has done it and had a really good experience, and I think that's super powerful. And finally, like it's really important to use your networks. So as well as CAG and your current participants, need to think about like diversifying who you reach out to, so different online groups, people in other organizations, university students, local young people, youth groups. Like I think it's very easy to like pick groups you've heard of and not research other smaller groups that you might also be able to reach out to, and get them involved. I know that's been a good way for us, like Lizzie said, like DofE students, like maybe even reaching out to schools who have DofE, who run DofE, and they have those students that need volunteering hours. So to like put this into context, I'm going to talk about our practical support scheme. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, we match people in the community that need a little bit of extra support. So this can go from anything from like picking up their prescriptions to picking up shopping, or someone called up last week and they needed their glasses fixed and we had a volunteer ready to sort out their glasses. So it's literally, we need a big pool of volunteers who can we can call on, and they can receive referrals and they sort them out for the people in need. So this, we set this up in response to coronavirus, and had an unbelievable response from the community, very successful. So to make this happen, we initially used a key message. So this was sign up to help out local people in need near near you with small acts of kindness, and repeated this across all of our social media channels and in person and posters and emails and newsletters, to make sure that it was a really clear message that everybody was getting who was going to sign up to our programme. So then we supplemented this with details of what we were going to ask our volunteers to do. So here we have register with Oxford Hub's practical support scheme, and we will contact you when we receive a referral of someone in need near you. This might involve grocery shopping, gardening, topping up someone's electricity meter, or more. So people, when they sign up, they know where to sign up. They register with Oxford Hub's practical support scheme. They know that they don't need to do anything until we contact them when we receive a referral. And 3, they know like what they're going to be doing, or maybe not what they're going to be doing. It could be very varied, but there are things that they might need to be doing. So it's very clear for the volunteers that sign up, the like pathway that they're following. So methods that we use to spread the word. So our social media was a massive part of our like campaign to get volunteers. This was spread by contacts at different organisations, other online groups, community members, to notify their members, and also, like, again, as I say, word of mouth, which is super important. And if you build like that network of people that know that your organisation is good and associated with like positive feedback from your volunteers, you're much more likely to build a bigger network. So yeah, this is what we found from the practical support scheme. So I'm trying not to speak too much because I know we're a little bit like rushed, but here are some questions that would be good to go back into groups and talk about. So firstly, what is our key message that we're using to get people involved? So it needs to be super clear, super concise, and so that volunteers know what they're signing up for. What does the role involve, i.e. how much time, what will they be doing, how will they get started, the methods they need for that. Who do we already know that can help spread the word, like make a list? Because if you keep that list and keep that network that you're building, it's only going to grow. And finally, what methods will we use to get out of our key messages? So anything from flyers, posters, events, newsletters, social media, videos, etc. So that is a little summary of recruitment and publicity. If anyone has any questions right now, I can answer them, or we can go straight into breakout rooms to discuss a little bit further. I don't know if I can see the chat while I'm sharing my screen.
It'll be just 10 minutes for breakout rooms, and then 5 minutes to feedback what we've chatted about.
Fab. Can I hand over to Christabel or Anis to put us back in the breakout rooms?
Right, everyone should have been invited to one now.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Yeah, Dasha. Hey, Dasha. I like how you've changed your name.
All right. Okay, great. Oh. There we go. There it should be. Okay. So what sort, I mean, I think one of the questions, what can help us spread the word, and I'm just thinking, you know, you were saying for low carbon Oxford North, it tends to be sort of through word of mouth, but do you think there are kind of any other kind of organisations or, you know, other kind of people that you could be speaking to that you haven't already made connections with locally? You're on mute.
Yes, so just quickly on that, yes, so we have been talking about other organisations like residents associations and so on. I mean, whenever we do anything, there is a blanket sort of social media, newsletter, mailings, contacting people to put it on their notice boards, you know, all of that. But actually maybe building personal relationships with some of those other organisations might be actually a bit more effective than the sort of, blanket approach.
Thanks. Okay. All right. I'll pass back to Lizzie.
Yes, me or the other Lizzie? We've got two. Me. Great. Yes, should we do discussions, feedback from groups? Let's have, do we think we can have someone different from each group feeding back this time? I'm going to randomly nominate someone we haven't heard from yet and be really mean. Let's have Dasha. What did you guys chat about?
Yeah, hi. So we covered a bit. I mean, I think one of my takeaways from it, this discussion, is how different, like you mentioned, social media recruitment versus word of mouth. I found that in my own experience, word of mouth is much more engaging. I mean, if you're talking to someone on the street, or I've done a lot of recruitment in university settings, so engaging with people in the library, people will, you know, notice you and kind of care more about that rather than seeing endless events on Facebook and whatnot. And we were talking about how basically that people get volunteer fatigue. We mentioned that in the last session, but what I've noticed too is I'm getting digital fatigue now in this digital COVID age, you know, so you might engage with people through social media now, but what do we do? I mean, we didn't come up with an answer, and I think it would be very hard to come up with an answer, but you know, one concern is how are we going to continue to engage with people if we can't safely or easily engage with them, you know, face to face on the street? People might be wary of that kind of engagement, but are people also being exhausted by digital engagement? And you know, people might sign up for a workshop or an event, and then, you know, the day will come and they'll just be too tired from emailing or from sitting on Zoom calls all day. I mean, I know that before this meeting, I thought, God, do I have the energy? And so, I mean, this is something I wanted to do, you know. So we didn't come up with an answer, but the concern is, how do we keep people engaged digitally if that's the easiest way for us to try and reach people at this point? But are people going to be willing to, you know, engage with us? So.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. COVID's made it all so much trickier now that we're all stuck on Zoom 24 hours a day. So I definitely feel that as well. But yeah, word of mouth.
I don't know if anyone else wanted to contribute from our group, but that's what the general idea, what we talked about.
Julia?
Just a very quick note on the word of mouth thing. Actually, the Oxford Hub stuff, the thing that caught my eye was a tiny little card that came through the letterbox very early on, I think. I think that was probably the same initiative. And actually, I've then subsequently seen it in various emails and mailings and social media and so on. But just thinking back, that was the thing that most caught my eye, a little card through the letterbox.
Yeah, and that was part of a program design thing that enabled it to be that widespread, because we it's that acknowledging that you can't be capable of delivering the whole programme and getting the word out to everyone. So getting those key volunteers across Oxford and saying, now it's your job to go and spread the word to everyone on your street, whether you give them a flyer or you knock on their door and chat to them, and doing like devolved word of mouth that way. That's probably how that flyer got to you, if you're interested in the flyer's journey. But yeah. Okay, volunteers from other groups.
I think I've got a hand raised as well.
Yep, Farum, you've got your hand raised.
I do. Do I have? Now you can hear me.
Yes.
Can I go?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things need to be kept in mind, and that's partly from experience and partly in terms of the effectiveness. I think for many people in the room, if I presented like I'm looking now to some people in the UK, I don't think they would listen to me, right? Let's be honest about that. So that would, the personal interaction is going to be problematic. I don't have that problem to that extent in South Africa because politically and socially we're somewhat different. What I found works very well is a combination of our WhatsApp group. So you actually know the community people or they know you, and then you share social media stuff. And that's been really effective for us.
Yeah.
In fact, through COVID stuff, we started up in different neighborhoods, a thing called CAN, Community Action Networks, and each neighborhood has one. So they work through the WhatsApp group, they then work through email, and then they work through the one-on-one personal interactions as well. So your neighborhood knows you. And from that, you know, there's a track record. And that's been very effective, actually. It's really gotten a whole lot of people fed. I'm just wryly smiling that younger people finding that they zoomed out. I'm not at all zoomed out, actually. I just love the online interaction. It makes it so much easier. But then there is something that I can add there because I've been working online since 2003. So it's second nature to me. You know, what is unusual for me is to actually have to talk to people. I sort of run away from that. But anyway, yeah. But a lot of the stuff that I've heard, and I'm sorry I came in a bit late, that I didn't get everything, did make a lot of sense, and certainly something for us to use in our neighborhood groups as well. So thank you. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Definitely, those relationships are absolutely key, and useful to think about. They don't need to be the people who've already signed up to be involved in your organisation. It might be a friend or a friend of a friend. But if you can get them to pass that word on or share it in their WhatsApp chat or something, then you're doing that word of mouth. So yeah, using the relationships that you have is absolutely key. Okay, we are short on time. So unless anyone had anything else they urgently wanted to feedback from those breakout rooms, should we crack on to the next bit? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So if you are able to get the slides back up, Charlotte, I think we're back to me.
Fantastic. Here you are.
Great. Thanks, Charlotte. So again, we are pressed for time, so I'm going to speed on. So now thinking about onboarding and inducting. So making that leap from someone making that first expression of interest to them actively being involved. So how do we get all those well-wishers to actually be doing something and making a difference? And again, it's important to remember that if someone has signed up, then they do want to be involved with you. They do want to do something nice. So it's about making that journey as easy as possible for them to get the best rate of sort of conversion from that first pull to the second. Also really important to say, I did just say this in my breakout group, but really important to say that at Oxford Hub and across the voluntary sector generally, from that initial expression of interest to active participants, there's usually at least a 50% drop-off rate. So that's why the recruitment and publicity, you need to be spreading your net as wide as you possibly can, getting as many expressions of interest as you can, so that when you have that drop off and the group becomes smaller, because that inevitably will happen, as I'm sure you all know, you still have enough people to do whatever it is that you're trying to do with your group. So when we think about the onboarding and inducting process, which I think might be where a few people are getting stuck in their groups, it's really helpful to sit down with a pen and paper and think about the journey of the person. So where do they hear about your group? What's their first step to getting involved? What do they need to do next in order to be on the steering committee or to be taking part every week? What do they need to do? Do they need to do training? Do they need to come to a meeting? How can we tell them that as quickly and concisely as possible? So if you have thought about the program design and that focus on your key message, what you want to do, then this should be quite easy. The common thing that we see a lot of people doing, which is really tricky for people who have expressed interest to engage with, is that, oh, you want to get involved? Yeah, well, let's have a phone call and we can chat about it. Or, oh, just come to our next meeting, it'll be fine. Because that is quite, it seems straightforward if you're the person who's trying to engage people and you're just saying, oh yeah, come along, it'll be great. But it is quite confusing and vague for the person on the other end who really wants to have something very tangible that they can get involved with. And that is why we see so many people going for those one-off volunteering opportunities, because it's really easy, makes sense, super quick to get involved with. So hopefully that makes sense. Charlotte, if we want to go to the next slide. I think we'll skip the case study and go straight to the reflection questions. So I'm going to head back into breakout groups. Yes, thanks, Anais, you just answered that question. So thinking now about that onboarding and inducting process. So once someone has signed up to your newsletter, or perhaps they've sent you a message on Facebook, or they've found a flyer on a community notice board, what are their immediate next steps? So what do they need to do? Who do they need to speak to? What form do they need to fill out? And after someone's signed up, how can we make sure that they hear back as soon as possible? So they're not kind of hanging in the lurch, wondering, are they ever going to get back to me? Or should I get in touch with another volunteering opportunity who might get back to me more quickly? And how can we communicate that as clearly and concisely as possible? So yeah, we want to make sure we're getting back to people as fast as possible. We're being really clear about what their direct next steps are, so that they're not confused, they don't lose interest, they're very quickly engaged. The next thing is in their calendar and they're going to come and do it with you. Again, this might be one that you need to take back and discuss with the rest of your group who aren't here, or maybe have a bit more of a think about, because it is a tricky one and it's really important to get this right so that you've got that continued long-term engagement. Are there any immediate questions before we go back into our breakout rooms? Just wave your hand or pop it in the chat. Nope, I think everyone is happy. Yeah, Lizzie suggested mixing up the breakout groups. I don't know if that would be easy to do, nice. That might be quite nice to chat to people who are from different groups and backgrounds. Yeah, cool, let's do that. So we're going to have, I think, maybe if we go for 8 minutes of discussion, as we're running a bit short on time, and then we can have a bit of time to feedback as well. That would be great. I'll see you all in a bit. And give a nice time to rearrange the breakout rooms. Sorry, nice. Just drop that on you there. There we go. Okay, I think we're still waiting for one more group, but we can start. Does anyone have anything they wanted to share from their group? I can start off with a little something from our group, which was a phrase that Faroum introduced, which was moving people from anxiety to agency or anxiety to action, and sort of that idea of empowering people who are worried about an issue to letting them do something and creating that space for them to do something about it, and how empowering and helpful that can be for us as individuals. Thought that was a really good way of looking at that onboarding kind of loop. Yeah, who else would like to share?
I think something that we talked about, which Ian mentioned in our group, was that was in his local area and the surrounding villages, because he lives in a rural area, there was loads and loads of volunteers who were really keen to support. This was at the start of the pandemic as well, where there was a huge kind of like, lots of people had change in circumstance where they had a lot more time, and also there was a lot more need for support. But then there were a lot of people who wanted to help, who were just sort of like sitting there like ready to help, but they weren't being given any tasks because there was sort of like a glut of volunteers. And then the people who were in need sort of came through a bit more slowly. They sort of like trickled in, and then there were still a lot of people who didn't get to help, and maybe by the time they did get asked to help, they maybe went back to work or things changed for them. I guess that's really specific to this environment at the moment, where things are adapting really fast and changing. But I guess it's like we were talking about the challenge of how to engage with people like that, because I think Ian mentioned like an email came through every now and again, and it was almost like the main thing that he took away from that email was like, there's still nothing for you to do, and like that is disengaging for volunteers, and how to overcome that. And then we talked a bit about the Street Champions network and how that I felt like that was really good, because it created a more informal neighborhood group, and meant that people could sort of have a social element to being part of that group. And it was just like everyone on a very small scale, like one street, who could either help or be helped in a more I grew up in a village, but I now live in Oxford, so it's like it felt to me like that was more of a village type way of being, where people just sort of help each other anyway, because you're in a village and you all know each other. And it was a good way to sort of bring that practice into a city.
Yeah, that is interesting. I think so many people had that problem. It almost became a problem of finding things for people to do, which just so the opposite way round to what we're normally doing as community organizers, desperately trying to find people to do things, and suddenly it's swapped around and you're like, what do I do with all these people? So yeah, definitely a challenge. Anything else anyone wanted to add? I think we've only got half an hour left, and we wanted everyone to have a quick comfort break at about this point. So if no one has anything else they wanted to add, maybe we all take 5 minutes and then come back to the call. So you don't need to exit the call. You can just turn your camera and your microphone off and go make a cup of tea or go to the bathroom or whatever you'd like to do in the next 5 minutes. And then we'll reconvene. Is that okay with everyone?
We'll start promptly at 7:08.
7:08. See you all at 7:08.
See you at 7:08.
Hey, do you have another slide to do? Another couple of slides?
We did, but maybe we just, so the last one was about maintaining people once they've become engaged, but I think that's probably the least relevant one from people that I've chatted to, so perhaps we just send around the slides and say the questions are on there, you can read them, so we can crack on with power and privilege.
Yeah, because I was thinking, so the way I'd organised it was to do a kind of introduction to what power and privilege is, and like how it might exhibit itself, and then we do breakout rooms as well. But it might be nice just to like chat through the scenarios as a whole group, considering it's not a massive group. And that way we've got part of the workshop where we're all together discussing, and that way we can save time as well. Yeah,
that sounds good.
We do have to be out of the call at 7:40 because there's another one afterwards. So it's a little bit tight. Yeah.
Cool, sounds good. I'm going to go make a cup of tea and I will be right back.
All right.
Okay.
Cheers.
Are you all right to do that, Charlotte, and say that we're gonna skip it, but we'll send around the slides so they can read them?
Yeah, that's fine.
We were thinking it's the onboarding and induction bit probably isn't the main challenge that people are facing from what people have been saying, so it's probably the best bit to miss. I think. How's Schools Plus going, Charlotte? So you got
really good.
20 people?
125 signups as of this morning. Yeah.
So good.
So exciting. Like you said, Elliot, we're almost having the same problem. Like not enough pupils that need tutoring, which is mad because they definitely, like, all the schools really want this, but it's just a case of getting communications going with them a bit better. But they're slowly trickling in, so it should be fine in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Should balance out.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think everyone's back on the call.
Okay, fab.
Maybe a lot of people are on mute, no camera, but probably assume they're here because it's 9 past. If you want to crack on.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Is it over to me now? Yeah.
Yeah, over to you.
Yeah. Okay. Just checking. Okay. Lovely. So I feel really kind of like enthused by hearing about the very successful programs that Oxford Hub have been running, and I've definitely learned a lot. And what I'm going to do is change the key slightly and talk a little bit about how power imbalances might affect the way that you recruit volunteers or the dynamics in your group. And so what I aim to do is to kind of like just give a very brief introduction. We could have a whole 2 hours on this, but we haven't got that. Just to kind of get you thinking about some of those obstacles to growing your group or diversifying who's involved, and to kind of think through your own position within your group as well, and reflect on that a little bit. So I'm going to kick off by showing you another slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to have discussion again. But I think because the group's not super big, we can discuss as a whole, and hope that's okay for you. So what is power? Power is the ability or capacity to do something or act in a particular way. It's not sharing. Oh, sorry. Thank you for flagging that. I'm not sure why. Send it to me and I can share it. Is it sharing now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. How long was it going to be? Yeah, so it's like the ability or capacity to do or act in a particular way. And so on the flip side of that, to not have power is the inability or incapacity to do something or act. It also means that if you have power, you are able to direct or influence the behavior of others. So it means that you might have leadership, or you might be able to do something which makes somebody else do something. And sometimes this is happening and you're conscious of it, but often not. Privilege is very much tied up with power. And it's when an individual has an advantage over another individual due to belonging to a social group. Not only to belonging to a social group, but it is often tied to that. So this is things to do with like structural differences. So moving on to the next slide. Some of these differences are what we would call structural, and that's to do with structural oppression, and it's to do with the social structures around us. So that's around class. So that's not just to do with how much money you've got, but it's to do with the class that you're born into. And this is tied to privilege, is to do with the education that you have, the status and the symbols that are represented. It can be to do with the networks that you have access to, and also it's mostly to do with the opportunities you have. The same for race and ethnicity. We've heard about Black Lives Matter and discrimination against people of colour. These things occur as like implicit and explicit biases, but it also means that when you're working in a group setting, there can be more struggles if you're of a particular race or ethnicity than another, and white people have it easier. Again, gender. So we know about the struggle for equal pay, and that's still an ongoing discussion. But yeah, the kind of wider effects are that women have to fight harder to have their voice heard, to get into the same positions as men have, and so on. I think, yeah, age is up there as well as something which can create hierarchies. So the older you are, the more experience you have, potentially the higher positions you have in an organization. But then on the flip side of that, there is ageism, where because you're of a certain age, you're discriminated against, and potentially you have less access to spaces or to even to like venues or whatever it might be. Or it can be to do with like later on I've put stuff about health, but if you have a hearing impairment, it might be that you are at a disadvantage because you cannot participate in certain settings because you cannot hear and there's no other way of communicating. So the ones at the bottom I've kind of put there because they're like less directly tied to oppression, but they are influenced by these intersectional characteristics. So knowledge. So if for example, if you're a very experienced team leader, do you expect other people to know as much as you do and to be as capable as you? Or do you understand your privilege and how you got to that position, and you want to share your knowledge with others and show compassion when other people don't have as much as you? Potentially open up opportunities for training for other people before yourself. This is just food for thought, so you probably have more questions than answers to this. The organizational culture. So are you familiar with a way of organizing? And this is key when you're in volunteering, like groups made up of volunteers. So if you organize non-hierarchically, not everybody has the same experience as you. So are you aware of who is setting the agenda and who is defining how the meetings are organized and how going forward projects are organized? And are you as a group making sure that everybody is up to speed with that and not feeling left out? Time and energy are really big concerns as well. So who has more time? Is it a retired person or a single mum with 3 jobs? And I guess this is going to be a big question about, like, who is it who's able to do more, but also who is it that is not able to come to a meeting at a certain time or come to every single meeting, and how do you make sure that they aren't excluded as a result of that? Health, I've mentioned. Of course, it's physical health as well as mental health. And confidence, and I think this cuts through everything. So the reason I put it as a separate heading is because maybe you recognize yourself as a confident person, or you see other people around you who are natural leaders or charismatic. And what is the effect of people with lots of confidence on people around them that they work with less confidence? And I think that it's not a bad thing to have confidence, but it's just good to have a view that if you are very confident in sharing your opinion, does it shut out other opinions? And we'll come onto that in a little bit as well when we talk about the scenarios. So moving on to the scenarios. So when we talk about the scenarios, I'd like you to just think quite openly. There are no wrong answers, but also try, if you do have something to say, try and participate. I'm going to ask Anais to keep an eye on people who raise their hands so that we can all have a chance to talk. So scenario 1, imagine that you want to grow your group and have been trying to recruit members for many months. A few people have come to your meeting or 2, but they haven't stuck around. What factors might be preventing you from involving more people? And when I say you, I mean your group. So have a think, what do these have with power and what could you do differently? Has anyone got any ideas? I'm going to stop screen sharing for a bit.
Sorry, I was trying to put my hand up and just did a thumbs up by mistake. Sorry.
That's fine.
Thumbs up as well. I was just going to say, one of my questions I've sort of been tinkering away all the way through is about a feedback loop of some description from your volunteers, the people you're trying to engage. So if people aren't coming, there's something about not assuming a reason for why people either aren't coming to you or aren't returning. So I don't quite know what the answer is here, but what is the feedback loop process information gathering that you possibly need to build into this to help you understand why people might not be coming back or sticking or coming to you in the first place? Because it's one of those difficult things, isn't it? Is how do you find out without sometimes directly asking and not just making assumptions? So it's a bit of an open question, sorry.
No, I think that's a really good question. And I think if somebody has come along to your meeting once and then never turn up again, it's very hard to know. And I guess as a pattern, if that's occurring again and again, there might be ways of like reflecting as a group about how you would find that out, or trying to see whether there might be a particular culture of your group that puts people off. And I think that can be done separately from asking. I see that Farouk has a question.
Less than a question, just some feedback. I agree with Ian. I think it's really important to unpack why certain people won't come back. And what we've done is, in fact, gone back to people one-on-one. So it's not just me or, 2 or 3 of the other folk, people who felt comfortable going back and kind of just spoke to them and then brought them on board. If I talk from my own experience, when I moved into my neighborhood, and for those of you who don't, well, I'm sure all of you do know the historical antecedents of South Africa, our neighborhoods tend to look a particular way. I don't look like that. And so when I got involved in our local residents association, for different reasons, I'm older, I'm gay, I look the way I do, which generally implies that I'm religious, which I'm not. Most of the people who live in the neighborhood blocked off. And they blocked off because they thought I was somebody else, and from their own experiences. And I had to challenge that. For a while, it became really difficult. And so I opted to take my energies elsewhere. And until I decided that, in fact, I wanted to be in the neighborhood and I wanted to be an active participant. So I stayed on. And the points you made about the factors that would influence, we don't quite have the same class thing. It's a caste thing, and it's an economic apartheid of sorts. So the people in my neighborhood own their homes, I don't. And that was the division that they used. And yet I became and am one of the most active community members over and above people who actually own their homes. And recently, and this is really a case in point and quite a wake-up call, actually. Recently, when I went off the radar for a while because of COVID, I had no idea, but the groups were all kind of asking, well, where is he? What's happened? Whatever. So you kind of create a slipstream, and once you've created, and I'm not saying it's just me, I mean, there are other people who do that too. And once you have the slipstream, you can work and capitalize on that for all sorts of other things, which we've done, and quite well. But it does require a fair amount of backbone, gutsiness, thick skin, rhino skin, whatever. And you just kind of get in there and do what you need to do. But it's been interesting, actually, trying to change mindsets in South Africa, you can well imagine. But I don't think it's any different in the UK. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my feedback. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing your experience. And yeah, also that list I said about differences and hierarchies, that's not exhaustive. And Farouk mentioned their sexuality, that would be on there too. Has anyone else got any comments on that scenario? Lizzie.
Me, Lizzie.
I saw Lizzie from Oxford Hub's hand up. Did you also have yours up? Lizzie, go ahead.
Shall I go? Yeah. I was thinking about sort of the importance of, with regard to those different things, trying not to guess, as Ian said, trying not to guess what someone might be feeling or experiencing when they come to a meeting of your group, but at the same time being able to open up that space for that person, whatever their experience is, or in all the many ways that they might be different to you and the people who are in the room, and making that okay, and making that more than okay, making it welcomed, and wanting those different perspectives, sort of inviting them in as well, I think can be really, really useful. When I've seen it done, I've seen other people do that, and it works so well. But it's when it can be so alienating when you feel like you're the outsider who can't quite fit into the puzzle, into the jigsaw of the community group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are things that you can do that you've already mentioned about having kind of clear roles that make it less alienating, and then also just asking people what they wish to do and their expectations are, yeah, that comes with clear communication. I'm going to move on to the second scenario so we can talk about at least another one. So give me 1 second. I'll share the screen again. So the next one is, you're part of a group which covers a diverse geographical area and population in terms of class and race. You as a group are aware that the majority of members, existing members, are from a more privileged background. Are there things that you can do to make it more representative or diverse? And can you think of limitations to this? I'm going to again let you take that in and stop sharing the screen. Okay, does anyone have any thoughts on that particular scenario? Ian. And
Thanks,
then Liz.
I'll keep it really, really brief because I know I've talked already. It's actually a bit of a live conversation for us, very similar. So we've got a very broad geographical area, but we're remote and we're wanting to work with a broader spectrum. And the big issue that we've got about the majority of our volunteers are from privileged backgrounds is transport and access to be engaged and do what we do. So basically every single person that volunteers for us owns a car. That's a big issue, so, and we're struggling with that as a concept as to what we do. So in terms of people being able to access the activities work that you want them to do is a challenge.
Yeah, access is a really important consideration, definitely. Liz.
Yeah, I'm thinking when you said that about, there's been a lot of talk in the low carbon groups in the city about getting outside the green bubble, which consists of people who look like me. Rose Hill, who obviously are Rose Hill and Iffley low carbon, who have an inordinate spectrum there between Rose Hill, if people know it, and Iffley down the hill, which is very posh, for want of a better word. And when they were doing tree planting, the Nepalese community who live in Rose Hill came along and just got on with it and couldn't understand why we were all taking so long, because they were so quick and slick and familiar. So doing something that made absolute sense within their culture. And the ones of them who'd already done loads of land-based work were showing the other ones, and it was great. And so now Rose Hill is famous. And then also at their repair cafe, there's a volunteer, and I can't, to the shame of me, remember which country he comes from, anything with the sewing machine. And he's an enormous asset, and they pay him because it's his work. And so their repair cafe was not completely white because of him. So it's about, if you're doing something that relates to people, whereas bike lanes, I read something recently about Oakland in California, where all this stuff, let's put in more bike lanes and let's make pedestrianised streets. And the black population in Oakland say, well, that's of no relevance to us because, we live in a different part of town and that's not going to help us at all. We need traffic lights so we don't get run over when we're walking. So it's about finding where people's interest really lies, it seems to me. And I appreciate, for the Earth Trust, I was down there the other day and at the Little Whitnam, and it's I can't get there without borrowing my friend's car.
Yeah, absolutely, Liz. That's a really good example of where people's interests are really important, and also that your group might have to accommodate different availabilities or ways of working or approaches to things as well. And I think, yeah, the limitation is possibly to accept that because of representation, it does matter to people whether their interests or themselves are represented in a group. It could limit what they want to do. I think that's something that you know, we can't always do something about. But then a way of doing that is to kind of link up with existing projects in collaborations. So maybe another group who work a lot with refugees, or a particular like community that isn't represented in your group, you can form collaborations. Is there anyone else who has anything to offer there? Lovely. Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of sort of touched on that, Christopher, but yeah, just to echo that, I think you can kind of fall into the, yeah, I think there's a lot of conversations in the green movement about how we're going to increase diversity and how we're going to bring people into our, to get involved into our movement, our vision. And I think I think maybe we need to be thinking more about, okay, how are we going to make, how we're going to kind of bridge that gap and actually get involved with other projects and, build something kind of shared together, as opposed to, because, we're going to, if your group doesn't really represent much of, isn't particularly diverse, then potentially what you're actually working on also isn't going to be kind of resonating with all the people in your community.
Julia.
Just one thought which I've sort of been grappling with, and it's a question really. So North Oxford is generally a very privileged area, and I mean, one question I have thought to myself is, if as a sort of privileged and wealthy kind of area or country, even looking at it globally, we're responsible for for the majority of carbon emissions, is there not also sort of an element of duty that makes it right that people from that background should actually be putting the effort in to put things right for the benefit of everyone, including those groups who are much less responsible? So I don't know, it's a question. I mean, the point about the bike lanes is very interesting, because of course I think part of this is actually thinking about what you're trying to achieve and who it benefits, maybe as much as who sits on your committee, but that you hear, maybe there's other ways of hearing those voices that don't necessarily require someone to be sat next to you putting in the work. Maybe that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, but I guess that sort of comes into what Christabel was saying about power, and if there is a group of white, privileged, wealthy people making the decisions, how can they be sure that they're making the right decisions for everyone in the community? And who decides, and how do they decide? If you're not speaking to people who are isolated from that community, you're not necessarily going to know whether what you're doing is right for everyone. And I think it's really difficult to strike the balance between sort of like desperately trying to be more diverse for the sake of, for it being important as a value of yours, but actually what we really should be thinking about is like, how are we actually benefiting other communities? And I think, maybe by involving ourselves in other community groups could be a good way to do that, because I think when you talk to people in different community groups, you find that they all, if we're looking at the environment, they all care and they all really worry about the environment, but they don't know what's going on and they don't know how to help, but they would definitely do it if we knew them. So I think it's just like getting to know people as well. I think, there is a big responsibility on wealthy societies and communities, but also we can't decide for people as well. It's a tricky one.
It's a really good point, Liz. Thank you. Kate, you're on mute.
Sorry. No, I just wanted to say, I mean, I live in a fairly large village, but I would say that we're, I would say the majority of people here are pretty privileged. And having lived in London myself and taught in inner city schools and things for years, it's a massive difference being out here. The thing that I would really like to be able to do is to involve more young people. I feel personally my generation is quite responsible for what the situation that we find ourselves in now, in terms of having ignored the climate change problem. But I'm doing this for future generations, and I want to have younger people involved. We have one young lady who's on our committee, but we had a problem initially. We had two, and then one person was quite domineering in there, and there was a bit of a power struggle thing there, and that was really quite difficult to deal with. But I think it's about, not one person shouldering dealing with that. It's, it's making sure that, everybody's kind of, you go to somebody else and you ask and you get input and things to try and deal with it. And sometimes people don't realize that they're coming across maybe the way that they are. So, and also it's looking at not just assuming that they're coming across because they're a domineering and powerful person, but actually that they might have underlying issues themselves. And, you do have to, I know Farouk said about being, sensitivity is really, really important when you're dealing with people.
Totally. And I think yeah, you're totally right, and it can be like quite a difficult conversation to talk to people about the effect that they might have on you, but when challenging privileges, it isn't always a comfortable ride, but it can be much more constructive if you get into a conversation about it not being the person's fault, but the kind of privilege that they carry. Anyway, I think I would love to discuss the other couple of scenarios with you, but we have to be off this call in 4 minutes time. So I'm going to send you the slides, and it would be great if you take those scenarios to your groups maybe and discuss them or think about them in your own time. And then if you have any questions or comments to email, or if you want to discuss them with other people, then to email around the group. I will be sharing my slides as well. Yeah. So I'm just going to quickly show you one last slide, and then we'll be ending. So yeah, and there'll be in the slides that you'll get in an email, there are some ideas for rebalancing power as well, and these will have been a summary, but of course, yeah, it's just a very, very quick summary. If you have any questions, also ask me about them. Some of the next steps, just to make you aware that there is a facilitation training happening on the 22nd of October. That's for beginners, and that'll be really good at thinking about power. So about how a facilitator can help share power amongst your group, and good facilitation matters. And then more advanced one is the week after, on Thursday the 29th. They're both in the evenings. They're run by a really great organisation called Navigate. And there's also a session on resilience skills on Monday the 26th of October, which is brilliant. It's kind of about self-care, but also about how to be reflective about yourself within the activism that you do, and being aware of your capacity